Well, hey, I'm Jason Morgan. I'm a technical evangelist with Buoyant, and just means it's my job to talk to folks about Linkerd, encourage them to try it out, and help them be successful once they get on that path.
Yeah, and I'm Catherine Paganini. I'm the head of marketing and community at Buoyant, and I work with Jason on Linkerd, but also on the Cloud Native Glossary, one of our pet projects that we created together and are very proud of. So yeah.
Yeah, so you're asking about what the Cloud Native Glossary is. So it's a glossary of terms, but it's not as boring as it sounds, I promise. Or it's really boring, but still helpful. So our intent was, as we kind of got together and started working together, before working together at Buoyant, right? We'd each spent a lot of time trying to explain to folks concepts around Kubernetes and Cloud Native. And like, if you've ever had to talk to your friends or people in your social circle about this space, you'll find a lot of the terms don't have meaning to a lot of people, right? And the glossary was an attempt to take terms like service mesh, container, API gateway,
observability,
observability, and make them easy to understand in plain language. And the English part's good, but the really exciting part is...
So we have several localization teams that are localizing the glossary in, I don't know how many languages now, but we have Chinese, Korean, Spanish, Portuguese, French. Well, French is not live yet. Spanish, and I don't know, probably missing some.
The Hindi one's live.
Oh, Hindi, yeah. So very excited about that. And I think one of the important things, especially for someone who is with my background, who does not have a technical background, it's really hard to understand Cloud Native. There is no context, and most of the content out there really assumes a lot of context that people like me don't have. And so one thing that was important for me when we create glossary was to write in a way that people like me can understand, because there are a lot of people who need to understand it and are not technologists. You have all the people who are working in cloud native companies, marketing, sales, but the leadership team too, who are ultimately making all these decisions about whether to fund a project, which is very expensive. And so if they don't understand it, you cannot talk to your leadership team about these projects. How can they make these decisions? So the goal is not only to educate technical people, but also non-technical people. And I feel like it's good, like the way they're described, it's accessible for both, right? Like if you're just getting started, a technical person will appreciate the easy, digestible language, but it's not excluding non-technical people as well.
I think that's a great explanation. So I heard a couple of questions in there, right? Like, is the glossary done? No, right? Absolutely not. And it won't get done. And what we'd really love is for folks that are good at understanding and explaining technical terms, if you have some time and some bandwidth, look at the definitions that are out there. If they can be improved, send PRs. If there's something missing, create an entry. If you're a business or if you are in the space and you use a lot of terms, but you don't necessarily have them defined, don't go write your own glossary and definitions. Link to the Cloud Native Glossary. And then whatever language is your native tongue, right? If it's not English, we would love to see Cloud Native become accessible. And that sounds terrible now I say it. I love the tooling and the technology to become more accessible to more folks. Make it a broader audience. Not so much for like specialized engineers that really love Kubernetes and containers, but make it for people that are just trying to get things done with computers, right? And make it easier for those folks. So I think I answered a lot of your questions.
Yeah. And I think one of the important things is the glossary is really a living document, right? Like things change all the time. Technology changes all the time.
Right.
That's why it's like, it's not good to have, like if you see definitions now out there, most of them are vendor provided, which is actually really bad because vendors might be biased towards their own product. They may not keep it up to date. There are lots of issues with it. So like having a glossary that is vendor neutral by an institution like the CNCF, where anyone can contribute, that is a living document that is always updated, that will ensure that there vendor neutral, that they are objective, they're not, representing some vendor's view. And so, yeah, I mean, it is changing a lot. So that living aspect of it is really important. And that's why I think it will never end unless Cloud Native ends. So there's always new technology coming. And yeah, and it's like, as people use it, that's our goal, right? As people use it, you may, because there's one approach, right? Contributing, looking for specific terms that you feel should be included. But my hope, or our hope, is that as people use it, right, you're using it because you want to link to it or understand it or explain it to someone. As you read it and you're like, I actually think this could be improved, or this could be slightly better. We could build on that, right? Like that's how it gets better. It's a little bit like Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia is really good because so many people contribute, right? And the more people contribute to the glossary, the better it will be. I think the foundation is there. So we have a lot of ground covered, but I'm pretty sure a lot can be improved. And I'm pretty sure we missed terms. So there are some terms that I really want to get out there, like GitOps, needing help with that, simplifying that. So if anyone is interested in helping out with that term, it's not merged yet. So yeah, I mean, anyone interested in that. And what Jason mentioned, really, it's explaining complex terms and simple words is really hard. And it requires a lot of knowledge, but it's really fun once you get there. So it's not easy, but it's like, and it's like once you see it, once you read it, and it's such a, it's just, I think it's like a joy to kind of read it, and it's like so digestible. It's like, suddenly it sounds so easy. And then, Yeah, the only caveat I'd put out there, if you're thinking about it, right, like if you're going to write a definition for something, it's not an entry level thing, even though there's no code, right? You really have to understand what you're talking about in order to explain it in a clear fashion. Just be warned out there if you're thinking about contributing. There's like important. A little bit of a misconception. I think like the localization aspect of this is good for entry level contributors, just because there is already a solid definition you can work there. And then localizing is a lot easier in that sense. It's still difficult, like localizing well, but it's a little easier. You don't need to be an expert knowing it because someone did already that research. And so yeah, but it's fun. And the other thing is like we have monthly meetings where we meet with all the different teams around the world. It's so exciting. You have like people from China, from Korea, India, Spain, South America, Brazil. It's like, it's really cool. And like that community, and we all try to help each other and they learn from each other. I think that is a little bit special. I think that it is a little bit more international because of that localization aspect of it. And also I know that the Kubernetes has localization, but I don't think they collaborate as much as our localization team, and they don't know each other as much. And so I know some of them do localize the Kubernetes docs, and they've said that. And I think that's kind of nice, meeting people all around the world. So that's pretty cool. So the origin story for the glossary, right? Like, where did it come from? I say this a lot, right? But it's really cool working with Catherine because, like, most people, when you see something that's messed up, right? You're like, oh, that's funny, that's messed up or whatever, right? And you kind of move on. So Catherine and I started working together because she saw the CNCF landscape doc and was like, hey, this is a giant mess of things. It's hard to understand. And she's like, let me figure out how to make it better. So she started writing this article series on explaining the cloud native landscape in a clear fashion. And so we started working together on that. And as that grew and, we actually started to make something really valuable, we got involved with the CNCF, and Catherine's been working with the CNCF for a while, but we're like, hey, there's a lot of focus on technical value from the CNCF. But what about like actual outcomes? What about business value? And long story short, we set up this business value committee within the CNCF. And when we set it up, we're like, hey, what are some things we can do to help the CNCF add value to businesses? And one of the early ones that we came up with was a glossary of terms. Like, it would be really helpul if that's the first thing. You need to understand the concepts before you need to have common language. Right? Like if you and I use a word differently, the same word differently, that's a barrier to understanding. And so having shared definitions seemed like the best and most boring place to start. Yeah. And I think the CNCF started out really as at the earlier on, like only the most technology advanced and highly skilled engineers were interested in the topic. So they had all these content, very geeky, right? Like, but so much change since then. Like, we're seeing so much adoption. And as I mentioned before, you have all these marketing and salespeople, all the leadership team, you have all these people who are not necessarily technical, but it's for them critical for their business critical for them to understand it. Otherwise they cannot sell it. Otherwise they cannot make the right decisions. But there was no content that was like for them. So like we also thought like, because the first articles that we did was for the new stack, and that was great. That's where we got a lot of feedback. And at some point we said like, CNCF should own this type of content. It's like, it's great. We love the new stack and really appreciate the opportunity. But like the CNCF is the eminence in this, field, and they should kind of make it easier. Yeah. It's a little too much.
It's a very satisfying sound, though. I really enjoy it.
So I think one of the things that...
with the business value subcommittee, right, do you believe, and this is really a Catherine question because I don't know the answer, do you believe that the CNCF is going to do more things that focus on business leaders and help them understand the value of the tech, not just the tech?
So, first of all, like the business value tracks at Coupon is something that came out from our... And we... So we actually we did the first, we were the first reviewer for the first, because it was like a separate thing.
Yep.
So I think that is new. It's still kind of, it is geared towards technical people too, but it's talking about the business value, right? And I mean, the business value subcommittee is there to create these resources. So we have created the glossary, where in the works is a project summary table, which is still not ready, but it basically puts like all the projects in one category side by side, and you can compare what they do. This is not like business value. There's also like a business case in it, but it's like making sense of it or helping end users actually select which projects they should evaluate. And that came because like a service provider mentioned it is so difficult for them to, like the landscape is overwhelming. He does not know which projects are relevant for their clients. It's like you either have the landscape, which just give you a name, and then you have like deep dives. And there's not like, how do you like, they need an overview. It's like to understand like, okay, ABC look interesting, I'm going to evaluate those. And it's really hard to kind of see what's relevant. And so that's like an end user request, right? Like, or need. So we try to cater to that. And then now we're also building a cloud native learning journey, which is basically a page that will have all these CNCF resources bundled. And it will start with content that doesn't require any previous knowledge, right? So it's like, okay, if you're very new, this is the 101 section. We start with the cloud native definition, then maybe the glossary, and then gets increasingly more advanced to really help people in their cloud native learning journey instead of having to find all these resources on from themselves. So I think most of that content is not like initiated by the CNCF, but like groups like ours, that's where people can come. And most of them is like generally people who say like, oh, this is a problem I've had. And then we were like, okay, if you're having this problem, someone else is probably having this problem. Like, let's solve this together. Like, let's create something that helps you, and in that way help other people too. So I don't think, it's not CNCF driven in that sense, but it's like these groups kind of create. There are a lot of groups, right? The cartographer's group is another group that created like the cloud native maturity model and all these things. So there are all these people who volunteer, contribute to open source without code and non-code contributions, also very important and very valuable. So there are a lot of initiatives, right? And so what we want to do is make it easier for people to find that.
And just to add a little bit to what Catherine said, right? Like you can see with, the things that the business value committee came out with, you see with the emphasis in talks at KubeCon, right? More user stories and getting out of vendor stuff, that certification that's meant to be like, hey, you're new to the space. Let's give you a baseline conversational knowledge that you need to have those hallway track conversations with a lot of folks that have been in the space for a long time kind of take for granted. So I think the CNCF is absolutely working to better explain the real value, not just the technological value, but the outcome value of projects.
And they're super supportive. The thing is, like, the CNCF is small. They have a very small team, right? And they depend, let's say, on the community to help and support. And like, once you have a good idea and they believe in it, they really give you the resources, right? Like, to create a glossary, you need someone to develop the website. And so we get all the resources, which is amazing. And then the PR team, like, that's where my marketing skills comes. Like, I know what needs to be done. And then the PR team is amazing. And then they're like, like, I don't know, they write a blog post or talk to reporters, and like, so they make the resources available to help get the word out, which is, so I think it's great. I've really enjoyed working with the CNCF.
All right, so you want me to define service mesh, so I'm going to do it off the top of my head. I'm not going to look it up, right? But a service mesh is, according to the glossary definition, and somebody look me up as you're watching this and laugh at how wrong I am, but it is a tool that uses effectively I don't think it has to be a sidecar, but uses a series of load balancers to route your traffic from an application through to this other process, right? Let me start again. A service mesh exists to take the platform level infrastructure that your applications need when you're going to run in a microservice environment and take that code or that tooling that allows you to do a good job at service discovery, secure your traffic over the network, do circuit breaking, do timeouts, do retries. Take it out of your application code so you're not doing it in a shared library, and instead put it in a separate process, route your traffic through that process, and give the responsibility for core usability on the network features for your app to something that can be managed by your platform team. At its core, it's intended to allow platform teams to deliver more value to application development teams by reducing their operational overhead and giving them better performance, better security for their applications. So, but look it up and feel free to mock me.
It's less technical in the glossary.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen underneath just as we go around.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Do we think everybody that's using Kubernetes should have a service mesh? No, I don't think everybody needs to have one. And I try not to deal in shoulds in a general sense. But I think for most folks that are using Kubernetes, right? Like a little bit of a story, right? Like I used to work at a company and we had a service mesh based on one of the really well-known service mesh products out there. I won't name it, right? And we used to tell folks like, get Kubernetes figured out first because it's hard. And then you add in a service mesh and it's harder, right? And that's a thing that a lot of folks deal with as they begin that journey. And since I've been at Buoyant, partly because it's my job to tell you to use Linkerd, right? But I came here because I believe Linkerd is good. I'll tell you, this is a tool that in my view and in my experience with customers that adopt it, it makes Kubernetes easier. So if you're doing REST-based services, you're doing gRPC applications, and you're running in Kubernetes, this is a tool you can add to your environment to enhance the capabilities of your platform and to make life easier for yourselves and your developers, right? And that's pretty awesome. So if you're building custom apps, I would recommend a service mesh. If your cluster is intended exclusively to host infrastructure components like your registry, your CI/CD system, other like vendored products that vendors are responsible for the core code, then I don't think a service mesh is particularly important unless you have like a high security regulatory requirement for encryption in transit. And even then you could probably bug your vendor to like use HTTPS calls between their components, right? That's my view on that. I don't know. Do you have anything to add?
No, it's like, it's more of a technical part.
Yeah.
It's like, I hear it all the time that a lot of people say like service meshes are think that it's so overly complex, but then they try Linkerd and it's not. I of course cannot have an experiment with it because I don't code, but it's like, apparently it is a lot easier than a lot of people think. And if you get a lot of value out of it, and we always say like, just give it a try and then see for yourself. Don't believe us. just try it and then you'll see.
Best features of Linkerd. The thing that I tell people is we think Linkerd is awesome because it's boring, right? Like I think the best feature of Linkerd is you can have something that runs in Kubernetes, install Linkerd, add that application to the mesh, and it still works, right? And I think that's fantastic. Beyond that, right, like somewhat, whatever, tongue-in-cheek value point, right? Mutual TLS, like having a guarantee that every conversation in your cluster between components is going to be encrypted, and both the client and the server are going to be positively identified using cryptographic identity, I think is really a big deal, right? Like the thing that you trust to do mobile banking, the thing that you trust to browse whatever secure thing you need to do on the internet, is the foundation of trust that you can use in your cluster between your components. And that's hugely powerful. And, third, it depends what you're doing, but I'll tell you, I had a terribly painful experience before Kubernetes trying to get 15 different app teams to all write a /metrics endpoint in their app and put some sort of comparable data. So I could look at app A and app B and see similar results. And that was brutally hard. With Linkerd, you get the same metrics for every single application without bothering any developers, which is my favorite thing. I hate trying to get people who are trying to develop a feature to instead stop what they're doing and build plumbing, right? That was not a great experience. Yeah, so you're asking about what's next with Linkerd and specifically around Linkerd and the Gateway API. So really exciting, I guess. Exciting is going to depend on who you are, but what I find exciting from a technical perspective is there's been a move with Linkerd to add things like policy, let you do header-based routing, let you do some more intelligent things with your traffic. But we're trying to balance that new set of features with, the thing that Linkerd has always been famous for, which is simplicity, not having a ton of custom resource definitions, right? Things like that. And the Gateway API project came along at an incredibly good time for us, right? And it turns out that the primitives that the Gateway API gives you in your Kubernetes cluster are exactly the sort of things that you don't just need from an ingress perspective, but that you want in order to manage traffic east-west between your applications. And we're adopting the constructs in Linkerd. I think by 2.14, we expect to be 100% Gateway API compliant, right? Which is really exciting. And it's going to allow us to do policy, do header-based routing, do traffic splitting, do all of it with without any new Linkerd-isms in your cluster. No changing the way you work to fit our mesh, right? Which is the reason we're easy to use today. And it's the way we're going to be able to give new features to folks out there while keeping that same promise. Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. So where do you go to learn more about Linkerd? Well, I bias towards Slack, slack.linkerd.io. You can join up, you meet other folks that are doing Linkerd, talk to us. See if you have, commentary about how badly I messed up the service mesh definition. I'm at Jason on the Linkerd Slack. You can find us on Twitter, just at Linkerd. We have a website, linkerd.io, where you can learn more. That's where all our docs are. Our Getting Started guide, which is fantastic. You can go get Linkerd up and running in a Kubernetes cluster. If it takes you 30 minutes, let me know. I'll also apologize for that.
And we have Service Mesh Academy.
Oh, right. If you go to Buoyant, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So if you're interested in getting hands-on experience with Linkerd, once a month we have a live workshop. And different topics. Next topic is GitOps with Flagger, Flux, and Linkerd. So really excited about that. I think that's next week. But every month there's a new topic. It's 100% open source. And
they're technical deep dives, right? So you're gonna really get to know a particular component of Linkerd and the way it works. I learned a ton when we talked about certificates and the way we do routing, and I could just really highly recommend it. Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. Thanks a ton for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's been a great conference. It's been great getting to hang out a little bit. So we've loved it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us and letting us share our little pet project and talk about Linkerd. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.